I told him you would. Oh, hey, I forgot to play the video starting out. So we're live right to our faces just staring at the screen because I didn't hit the button.
I was like, where's the video?
It's live. It's live. We're going to do this live. Wanted to play the trailer for Subclass, which is funding on our platform. And so, what is this, sci-fi? It's sci-fi teen drama?
It's teen drama sci-fi.
All right, let's go.
It's filled with kids. Kids who weren't born. They were made. Socrates, genius composer and Beethoven's worst nightmare. Vitalis looks at me like I'm floating in a petri dish. Demetrius, Olympian and captain of the football team. Isidore, I think her parents designed her to be some big movie star, but she turns down every role. 5 days a week, I'm constantly reminded of just how much I suck.
Rogan Rufflin, find your appropriate entry.
You're 120 seconds late.
Confident.
Perhaps you should get a new assistant.
Did God only make me to look up at others? I'm sorry,
Don't worry. It'll be our secret.
This one more for you guys, right?
Do you have some explaining to do?
If you could know all their secrets, see everything they're working on, wouldn't you?
What's really happening here?
One can only learn on a page what one is capable of understanding in their heart. Tempest, you've proven yourself. Welcome to the Circle. We will save the world, no matter how many lives it may cost.
Trust me. I won't lay ball down.
Here you go. I'm gonna stop Socrates, even if I have to burn this whole school down.
I've seen what they're working on. None of us have a clue what's coming.
What are we gonna do? We're just subclass.
Nobody's just anything. If I can save this school, then I can save the world.
Rogan, what are you thinking of doing?
Something that's gonna get me into detention. Like forever. You in?
I'm game.
The post-human era has begun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sci-fi for teens. Tell me about that show real quick, and then we'll get into the topic of the conversation.
Yeah, so it's a show that is trying to use sci-fi in kind of one of the most traditional ways you use sci-fi to think about if this thing that's in our society right now keeps going, what's going to happen. And so it's about the first graduating class of designer babies. And what they end up thinking about themselves and how they end up, trying to take over the world and how normal kids have to stop them. So just a great story idea, a great way of thinking through the issues going on in our culture right now, and something for teens, that where they're not going to have the teenagers suddenly start taking off their clothes and doing drugs together. So the kind of thing that yeah, surprise, that's not what most teenagers are like.
Right.
Teenagers that didn't go to ditty parties growing up, at least.
That is absolutely true. So today, first off, everybody that's watching, thanks for watching, thanks for listening, thanks for tuning in. If you're watching it right now, be sure to like and share and retweet and comment, and feel free to engage in the chat, and we'll pop your comments up live during the show. Yesterday, me and Jason went to go see Saturday Night, which was really good. It was a 90-minute. Yeah, really well made. It was a 90-minute, almost real time. I don't think it was entirely real time, but it felt like it. 90 minutes before the airing of the first Saturday Night Live, and I'm a late night comedy self-acclaimed historian and fan of that whole, especially the early 70s, 80s, Carson and that sort of stuff. But so I was excited to see it, but dude, the movie hit me in the gut.
Yeah.
I mean, this happens every time, because every time we talk about some sort of media history or cultural institution, the narrative is always the same. Like, it never ever changes. And that is basically young people build an institution, they become old, and then they sort of try to keep the reins and fight it from the young people. And that was what was happening at NBC during this time through this movie is, there's this Carson sort of era, old school comedy sort of era, and then this new school 20-year-olds who want to come on the scene and just disrupt everything. And that was just the battle and the tension between Lorne Michaels and the NBC executives of whether or not this show will even go live, or they'll cut to a tape of Johnny Carson at 11:30
rerun.
Yeah, rerun. Yeah, rerun of Johnny. Not even a new episode, a rerun. And so, yeah, there's a lot of things there, but I think when Saturday Night Live comes on, you see all these posts. A lot of the conservative news blogs tweet, "Oh, they finally went after Kamala. Kamala's done because SNL," and you just go, they've always gone after everybody. Sometimes worse than others. And sometimes too soft than they should have. But I think like if you look at Saturday Night Live like over the course of 50 years, which is a tremendous cultural institution by itself that it's been on that long, you see it's a lot more complex and complicated than just there's a sketch that trashes Kamala and then they report when they trash Trump. Right? So you get the both, but let's talk about the importance of the show, because I don't think a lot of people step back from like a 30,000 foot view and look at the significance of Saturday Night Live and think about how that one show is probably, I would say, the most influential pop cultural institution in the history of the United States. I think. And
definitely have to be in the running.
Yeah, for sure. Well, in the movie, Jim Henson's a character in that because he was on the first episode of Saturday Night Live, and me and you were talking about how funny it was that they make Jim Henson just this sort of moronic figure in it that will never do anything, and no way these puppets will make it, and they just he's kind of like just this side like laughing character, and you just go, yeah, but he was probably just as influential as Lorne Michaels,
Lorne Michaels and Jim Henson are probably two of the very most influential people in the last 50 years. And they're looking at each other and neither of them quite understands the other. And it's amazing. They do that. I think that's one of the most poignant moments is when they're in the elevator together and they just don't understand each other. And it's beautiful because they both ended up having huge careers.
So there's a lot of that. I guess you could say fan service in that film, especially if you know anything about TV history. Like it's just really a lot of cool sort of cameo sort of stuff. You go, oh yeah, that guy, but yeah, so the show obviously went live, barely made it to air, which I would say is not special for that show. I imagine every show of Saturday Night Live barely makes it to air. And so over the course of 50 years, you have just, I would say, bad sketch after bad sketch over and over and over again, live before an audience that doesn't laugh and a television audience that talks about how terrible the show is now. And it was never as good as it was in my day. Right? Like every generation has their Saturday Night Live cast. Who was yours?
Mine was Sandler. Dana Carvey to Sandler to kind of the Rob Schneider, David Spade, that era.
Yeah.
Chris Farley, I think, was the heart and soul of my comedy upbringing.
Yeah, I think I skipped that era a lot because I went straight to In Living Color, and then I was like really big into Mad TV. So I didn't really come around to Saturday Night Live until Farrell and Tina Fey and Fallon. So but that was only because I was really into Mad TV and all that, and all the sort of more sidebar sort of sketch comedy in high school and stuff like that. So, but I mean, In Living Color is a whole other show. We actually did a whole show on In Living Color, didn't we? I think for Cross Politic at one point.
For Cross Politic, yeah, with the Cross Politic takeover.
Yeah, that's right. We did that whole importance of In Living Color. But I think like the point is you have these eras, and they're in a rebuilding era. They're always in this sort of, we're a rebuilding era. And then they finally nail it. And then the top guys leave. You get, Sudeikis leaves to go do Ted Lasso or something like that. And everybody goes, this season's the worst season. And Keenan remains the same.
Yeah.
But for the most part, Daryl Hammond is still there too. He's the announcer now. But you see there's still this restructuring and rebuilding. And I think like we get to the point now, I've been watching this whole season of Saturday Night Live, every episode so far. And I'm like, man, it's actually pretty decent. It seems like the cast is sort of getting used to each other, and the writers are getting used to the cast and what they can do. And we have a lot of new talent that seems to be doing really well. But also politically, they're seeming to nail it too. I would argue their Trump guy, they still haven't figured out Trump. And I think Daryl Hammond nailed Trump. And it's kind of hard to, follow in Daryl Hammond's footsteps on any character.
Right. Yeah, he's too brilliant.
Right. Yeah, but I think like one of the things you can see is I actually don't like Kamala's character. I don't think she's a good impression, and I'll explain why. Because I think Kamala's jokes are about the writing and not the impression or the caricature of the impression. And Maya Rudolph is just playing Maya Rudolph as Kamala, as opposed to a Daryl Hammond, Bill Clinton character, which is just so far off. But you can see this really well too. Like if you watch the episodes, if you see Kamala Harris and then you see Dana Carvey's Joe Biden, radically different, right? Like if you want to know a true impressionist, like look at Dana Carvey and his Biden and his eyes, and everything's just a caricature, and the way he just repeats words, and just it's a lot more complicated than just I look like her, so I'm gonna play her. And it's so that's my personal thought. And I think like the Trump guy is like, well, he looks like Trump, and he has his actual voice impression of Trump is dead on. It's identical. And I think
what people don't understand, I think, is that Trump is already kind of such a caricatured personality of himself.
Yes,
because his personality is already so large that you actually have to tone it, I think, to get a good caricature. Right? And most people want to up the ante, and that's what I think Daryl Hannah does so well is. Or Hammond does so well is he tones down he caricatures in the other direction. So, because it has to be a caricature. It can't just be an impersonation. Right.
That's right. So the character is down, but I think the writing is really crazy.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And so with Kamala, I think they're scared to caricature her. And then the writing is kind of like the obvious, which is why I don't get excited when I see conservative blogs and they're like, oh, they really went after Kamala. I was like, well, they could it'll be interesting after this week. I'm excited to see Saturday Night Live because now they have it placed on a silver platter for them. and I don't think I really hope they do the Brett Baer interview. But so it'll be interesting. But a show like this, we talk about conservatives are really good with facts and data, and they're terrible at comedy and narrative storytelling and stuff like this. And I think like the main reason is because if you look at Saturday Night Live, you say, okay, well, where are the conservative talent incubators like Saturday Night Live in the conservative space? And there's none. There's none. Like a lot of your investment money and stuff in conservative media is invested by boomer generation looking for content for boomer generation. And there's not. What'd you say?
They're making Reagan.
The Reagan movie is a great example of that, right? They spent $30 million on that film. Nobody really saw it. It didn't do incredibly well in the box office. It might have made its money back, but when I was looking on early on, it didn't look like it would have. But, those guys that are the target consumers still have VHS players, so I'm sure it'll do great on the VHS market.
And the problem, it doesn't appear to be the quality of the movie is not the issue. With Reagan, I don't think it's because it was a bad movie.
No,
it was because it was made for people that don't really go to movies anymore and are older, and it's not really made for the demographic that says I'm going to go see a movie.
Right. That's right. 'Cause, we see this now. It's like, I'm reading all these reports. Oh, Gen Z never watches TV. They just do YouTube and TikTok. And I think a lot of that is true, but I don't think my question I always ask people when they say this is like, yeah, well, what long form narrative entertainment brand has been made for them? And there's nothing. So a lot of things. We're complaining because there's YouTube and TikTok and they're major competitors, but at least YouTube and TikTok serves them.
Yeah.
Right. Like the algorithm serves them content that they want to see, and whatnot. Whereas conservative space, Christian faith-based space. I just got off the phone with someone today, and we're talking about Becky. Right. Like Becky is the target audience of faith-based investors. Or faith-based film. And then, and that's the 35-year-old Lifeway Christian bookstore mom who is wrangling her kids when she comes into Lifeway, and she winds up buying a movie for a family movie night, right? But she's not the ideal target audience of any cultural media institution outside of faith-based film, right? And everything's getting poured into this. And so the problem we have now is that we don't have really significant sketch comedy that's really paving the way for new talent. I think a Studio C does come to mind.
Yes. Studio C and the Babylon Bee was going that direction, and then they sort of reeled it in. I don't know if they're restarting kind of a sketch thing or if they're done with it.
I remember we were talking to people who were saying that Babylon Bee was doing that sketch comedy. Well, they just released their movie, the documentary on January 6th. But I remember when I was talking to people about that, I was like, dude, I really hope they really dive all into that, because it's probably the most important, significant cultural thing they could do, I think, is to really become this place that incubates comedic talent. I think their challenge is, and whether or not they want to do it or not, is like, how do you just make it focus on comedy and not this political thing, which is what they're known for. But you really have to basically create an art house show that's variety, true variety.
True variety show, yeah.
So all of our entertainment in the conservative space is focused on just the SNL cold open, the political SNL cold open, and we forget about the Wayne's World and the Opera Man and all the other sort of comedy sketches and the writing and stuff.
And even like, you can't do that on television, on Nickelodeon. Like,
Oh yeah, that was sketch comedy. Yeah,
it was sketch comedy. Yeah, all that.
Produced by Lorne Michaels.
Right. And he also did. He also produced Kids in the Hall, which was like a Canadian version of Mad TV, or Mad TV was an American version of the Canadian show Kids in the Hall. Maybe is a better way to put it. Like one more level underground, and then it was one more level of getting the underground comics, but then putting it on prime time, right? So Mad TV, so SNL is Saturday night at 11:30. Mad TV was at 9 p.m., right? Or is it 8 p.m. midweek?
It was definitely before Saturday Night Live, yeah.
Yeah, so so it was an attempt to try and do like primetime sketch comedy. Kids in the Hall was that same thing. It ended up on Comedy Central in America, but so you have all these places where big talent can start, right? You can get it start.
Right.
And conservatives we don't do that.
No, because I was speaking to an investor the other day, and I said, I said the media industry is the only industry where people try to figure out how do we make the most expensive product and have the highest cost of goods in order to compete in the marketplace. And it's completely against the laws of economics. It's completely socialist theory of how you win in the marketplace, where it's like, oh well, you really need to have the money to win, and if you don't have the money, then and that's what Netflix did. I remember I think we were just kind of starting up Lore, and they announced that they're now spending $1 billion a month on content, and my first thought was, well, that's just a chest beating tactic.
It is,
like, there's no way that's a viable economic play,
right?
Yeah, and so
that's the silverback trying to prove he's the biggest.
Yeah, right. And I was like, why would you? And I was just thinking in my head of like, low budget indie films. Like if I was running Netflix, that would be what I would focus on. And I was like, so you're looking at maybe like sub 5 million per. I was like, that's a lot of content a month. But then, like, we never really saw the value of that. And then, of course, COVID hit and just wiped all that out.
And remember, they spent $400 million on the rights to what became Glass Onion. We didn't know what it was at the time, but what was the first one? It was a new slow burn. What was Glass Onion the sequel to? Do you remember?
Knives Out.
Knives Out. Yeah. So they for the second and third Knives Out movie, they were doing things like dropping $400 million. That IP is not worth that. And I liked Knives Out. This is not an insult to Knives Out, but that's a way of saying of cornering the market, of trying to raise the price of everything, raise the price of the expected price of everything so that you can price everyone else out. That's like going in and saying, oh, I'll pay triple for 90% of the gasoline in town so that no one else can have gas. I mean, that's what they were doing. It's not a bad corporate thing to do in the short run, but in the long run, it's not a good plan.
Right. Yeah. I think of the Saturday Night Live movie where Lorne Michaels runs up to the guy and he's like, "Hey, you want a job? It's absolutely terrible." And the guy's like, "What's it pay?" He's like, "Oh, that's the worst part." Yeah. Right. And so, you just sort of have this complete underground vibe. But from that, Saturday Night Live is not a cheap operation anymore. But what they've created is just a system, where now that they have the infrastructure in place and there's a cost to keep that infrastructure in place, but they can basically sample sketches and IP every week until something really hits. I think the last major IP that came out of Saturday Night Live was the Tom Hanks Pumpkins sketch. Right? You know what I'm talking about?
Oh my gosh, I forgot about that. Yeah. Was it Stephen Pumpkins or something?
Yeah, something like that.
It's completely ridiculous. It's so funny.
Yeah, but that created, one, it's recurring, so it's an audience draw, but also it created a whole Halloween animated special around it, right? So and I was watching an interview with Tom Hanks where he thought it was like a terrible idea and he didn't want to do it, and now he's forever locked into that character now. But the point is, like, you have this machine, and this machine runs live every Saturday night during the fall and winter and spring, and you can't turn that off. Like it says, it doesn't matter if it's ready; it matters that it's 11:30, right? Like that's what Lorne Michaels quoted, like, right? And so because it's live, you have artists who have to have a very strong backbone to fail before America week after week after week. But the ones that come out of that become multimillionaires. You get Adam Sandler's, you get Will Ferrell's, unfortunately, with the last movie he did with Netflix. But you have a talent incubation system, this sort of incubator for content, IP, and artists, and not only that, writers and all sorts of other crew that work on that show, and it's like, why? And I'll say this: the other great thing about that show is it consistently churns out young talent people have never heard of, like that. Right. That I think is like absolutely missing completely from the conservative space. So if you think about like conservative politics, like it's a very gate-kept industry. I wrote about this too the other day, where on my Substack, which you can follow at imkingginger.substack.com, where you have sort of this sort of protection that, when I was specifically speaking about the Daily Wire, but any conservative political organization, where how do you make fun of, with comedy, conservative politicians if you need the relationships with those conservative politicians for news sources and interviews on a nonfiction front, right? So there's always going to be this fear of upsetting the DC Beltway within these conservative circles if conservative politics are what's really the backbone of the finances for that, right? And so I think that's Saturday Night Live's problem too with NBC, where NBC is a completely politicized state-run media organization. There's absolutely no question about it. And they're having the same trouble of like, but Saturday Night Live is comedy, and we have to make fun of Kamala. And then you have, them saying, well, wait a minute, if you make fun of Kamala, then we're going to have trouble getting our, White House briefing credentials. So you can't go too hard, right? Because we need that press pass to be in the right. So that tension is the same. And I really think the only way to fix that is to completely create a non-political entertainment company. And by non-political, I don't mean based worldview. Obviously, that's going to be a part of it. But I'm just saying, like, not tied to political capital. That's funding your organization to promote votes, to get votes.
Yeah, that's it. Because if you're the capital, the ones providing the capital always become the primary audience, so you have to have I don't know if you call it non-political capital or capital that isn't, that the agenda is serve an audience and let the audience be the primary audience, that you're capitalizing on the audience, not capitalizing on more political money.
Right. I think like when you look at comedians like David Spade and Dana Carvey, especially if you listen to their Fly on the Wall podcast, which I do quite often, where they have these old Saturday Night Live cast members come on and they talk about it. They routinely reference the political agenda of Saturday Night Live without referencing it, if you know what I mean. Like, you can definitely tell there's that the environment has changed from the time Dana Carvey and David Spade were on there to now. And you can kind of sense that tension, and they'll ask about it when they'll have like Michael Che, and I just listened to Che and Colin Jost episode they had, and you can kind of sense that the comedians want to be more free than they are.
Right.
But I don't think that's different for the conservative space. So that's what I'm saying. Yeah. Like when I see conservatives and they're writing articles, it's like, oh, they went after Kamala this week. Kamala's finished. Or there was liberals just went after Trump. I'm just like, that is the problem. Yeah. Because we shouldn't view comedy that way. We should view comedy as, but like, was it a funny Trump impression though? Right. Because like Trump has been on Saturday Night Live and he made fun of himself. Like I watched on Twitter, they made a clip. They showed a clip of like, I guess it was Dan Harmon's Trump. And he was in Trump's hotel with all the gold and glamour and stuff. And then the real Trump came out as like a construction worker, mocking how ridiculous this place looked. And you just go, and now obviously that was pre-political Trump, that was NBC Apprentice Trump. But I think there's value to looking back on that and going, well, it hasn't changed. Like comedy hasn't changed.
Right.
Like there's still value there. And, I don't think the conservative blog posts about the politicization of comedy is really helpful unless you dig into the real actual truth of it and interview the writers and stuff who are complaining as well that their hands are really tied. But anyway, that's that's my thought on that front anyway.
Yeah. Well, I think that is the comedian's job, if he's going to be funny, has to be to tell the truth, right? That's got to be where the comedy comes from, or else it's not going to be funny. And the comedians know that because they've been the ones that stood on stages in smoky bars in front of real people and found out whether or not people laughed or not. The executives have another agenda as well, right? They want to be funny. If they're good executives, they want it to be funny, but there's always another agenda as well. And the comedians that don't last are the ones that also have that other agenda, right?
Right.
So, and I think you see this even in that SNL movie, the confrontation between the first head writer of SNL and the lady that was supposed to be redlining jokes that couldn't go on TV.
Yeah, evangelical Christian.
He goes after this woman, and I'd be curious how close to reality any of this was, because he goes after this woman, mocking her Christianity really, really hard in a way that, and they act like she was so shocked that she couldn't even talk, right? And but he is not a good guy ever in the rest of the movie, right? Like the whole everybody is like, well, he's funny, but nobody really likes him. He's not nice to anyone. He has no friends. Right. It's this weird moment where they all see him basically take her down by saying things that you're not supposed to say. And what was so strange about it is they weren't trying to hide the fact that dude had an agenda. He had a very specific. He had an anti-Christian agenda, and they didn't try to hide it, right? They're like, well, this was the case at the time, but I think I think that Lorne himself has proven through the years that his agenda is be funny. That's why he survived and that guy's gone,
Right. Yeah, that's exactly right. That was it was amazing to sort of to watch that happen. And if you think about like Lorne over the years, like 50 years of running a show is insane. There was a time period he took off for one season, I think, and it was a disaster. And then he came back and he hasn't left since. And obviously now he's trying to figure out who the next replacement for him is going to be. I'm going to guess Tina Fey.
That's my guess too.
But there was an episode of Fly on the Wall with Kenan Thompson. Who is Jimmy Fallon's co-host?
Oh yes, he's the dad of one of the Please Don't Destroy guys. Is that him?
Yeah. I can't remember. Steve something. Yeah, man, for the life of me, it drives me crazy. I can't figure out that guy's name. But it was funny because Dana Carvey asked Keenan, he's like, "You've been there for a long time.
Higgins.
Who do you think is going to replace Lorne Michaels?" And he immediately dropped his name, like without even thinking about it. He's like, "I hope it's him."
Steve Higgins.
And then immediately, what? Steve what?
Steve Higgins.
Higgins, right. He immediately dropped Higgins' name just without even thinking about it. And then he immediately pulled back and said, hey, but Tina Fey's great. And I was like, oh, it's going to be Tina. You could just tell. You could tell there was like this slip where he was, because Steve Higgins has been there forever. And he's super responsible. And dude, that's another great example. I'm glad you brought up Please Don't Destroy, because you have this sketch comedy trio, Please Don't Destroy, that's doing the digital shorts that took over for Lonely Island. And one of the main cast members there is Steve Higgins' son, right? So you almost have this sort of inheritance that Steve Higgins has passed down to his kids of comedy and sketch writing. And now they've from what I heard, like they, there's always that question of, obviously, some people say nepotism, some people say inheritance. I think inheritance, if you've earned it, is a far better call. But they were already doing really great stuff on YouTube before they even got the SNL thing, and I don't even think it was really a plan. It just kind of made sense. And now their sketches are great, and they've done a movie, and Conan O'Brien has sort of taken them under their wing too. And
because there's the running gag that one of them is Steve Higgins' child, and the other one looks like Conan, so everyone has always thought he was Conan's son. It's so funny.
Right.
But he's not really. But Conan plays his dad in their movie. It's funny.
Right. Yeah. And, it's really, like, it's really cool to look back on that and see just sort of how it's just this family. You build the institutions, and then you can train your sons and stuff and the skills that you have. But I think Higgins would be an amazing takeover for Saturday Night Live. I think he's a white male, so he's going to have a lot of trouble getting that. He might still get it. Tina Fey, though, is also brilliant. So I think what's hard is, she would deserve it.
Yeah, you've got multiple people that could do it, and it would change the direction of the show to not have Lorne there. And so really that's what the question becomes.
Yeah, so I think the bigger question is, one, can Saturday Night Live even exist without
him?
That's the primary question. And then if it can, it's going to be different. and it's going to be really hard to change a 50-year show like that, over time. But let's go back to the political nature of Saturday Night Live a little bit, because I don't want to underestimate how great Weekend Update is, and it's always been political. We had our Norm Macdonalds that were more on our side over time. We had who was the guy that we saw at the comedy club? He was a Weekend Update. Colin Farrell?
Yeah,
No,
Colin. No, Colin for Colin. Colin, the guy. He think he took over for Norm, right?
I think so. Yeah. And so I mean, Weekend Update alone is its own cultural institution at this point. I mean,
Colin Quinn.
Colin Quinn, yeah, Colin Quinn, and so you have just these series of Weekend Update hosts that from Chevy Chase to Norm Macdonald to Jimmy Fallon and Tina Fey and Amy Poehler, and and I was watching Weekend Update, and I remember when Che and Jost started, and I was like, man, they're not good.
Yeah.
And then I watched them this week, and I said, these guys are probably some of the goats of Weekend Update.
Yeah.
Like, they're so solid. Their chemistry is so together. Like, everything about a Weekend Update segment is polished and just on point. And the political jokes, even the jokes that are anti-Trump, are hilarious. And that's like really hard to do, especially I think the telling of a great joke is whether a conservative can go, yeah, that's right.
Yeah. that's true. Yeah.
That's true. But all comedy is based in truth, right? So, that what is ruined comedy is, like, you look at someone like Seth Meyers, which I did not mention in the Weekend Update greats, because I think he was too politicized, and then he took over late night, and you have. I was showing you this yesterday on the phone on YouTube. If you scroll through the videos of Seth Meyers, it's all Trump this, Trump that, Trump this, Trump that, Trump this. And you're just like, dude, he has not gotten over the fact that he was responsible for getting Trump to run for office at the press club event, and you see him, and then you see Colbert, and you just see this highly politicized One Direction comedy, and then you compare that with the anti-Trump jokes from Michael Che and Colin Jost, and you're like, completely different.
Right.
It's not mean-spirited. It's not agenda-driven. You could tell it was like, well, that joke worked. So that's why we used it.
Right. And the Seth Meyers had his moments with like the Stefan bit, the recurring bit with Stefan. Like, there were some funny things, but I think what it is
but that was the guy that played Stefan, though.
Yeah,
he had good chemistry together, but I think a lot of that boils down to Stefan and the writer who was writing for Stefan.
Right. Yeah. Which was oh man, the guy that never made it on as a cast member, but he was a writer, and then he got big. He just played. He plays the pig in the Spider-Man. He plays the Spider Pig. What's his name?
Yeah, I know who you're talking about. I can't think of the name, but
so he would change out the lines before telling him, without telling him. So right. The first time he was seeing the lines was on the card. That kind of sort of chaos of live television is John Mulaney. Yeah. Thank you, John. John Mulaney. That kind of like chaos to get the laugh I think is the magic that comes and goes. Sometimes SNL doesn't have that. It doesn't have, and then you get a guy like John Mulaney, he was probably on cocaine, and so that's why I thought it was funny. But that is, but
he's gone to rehab. He's good
over and over. Yeah, he's really good at it. He keeps making it back to rehab. He's a repeat rehab offender. But I think that conservatives are so uncomfortable with how because you're not controlling when they stop trying to or when they're not trying to control the narrative. That's when SNL's at its best, and that's what Seth Meyers has never done well, right? He is charming, he is good at delivery, a lot of things, but there's always that narrative control aspect that kills the heart of comedy, which is the heart of comedy is telling the truth.
Right. I think like you can look back at some of the greatest bits on Weekend Update that were in opposition to the controlling narrative, which would be Norm Macdonald and OJ, right?
The OJ, yeah.
Right. Now, speaking of that, like I watched a clip of Norm Macdonald on Letterman after he got fired, and Norm Macdonald just, he said, "Did they tell you why they fired you?" And he said, and they were like, "Well, the NBC executive said I wasn't funny," and Letterman just started laughing because everybody knows Norm Macdonald's like one of the greatest of all times. Like he was. He was the comedian's comedian, and so,
right.
And he was like, "Oh yeah, I know that executive." he's a, yeah. So, Letterman trashing NBC through the years is some of the best comedy ever. So you have Norm Macdonald defying the system, going on The View, of course, and talking about Clinton. It was classic. And then you have I would throw that back and say that Colin Jost and Michael Che, and where they swap the jokes and they each tell racist jokes, And so if you haven't seen that bit, you need to find that on YouTube. But basically. Colin Jost, who's white, has to tell jokes only a black person can say, and then Michael Che has to tell jokes only a white person can say, and they do that. I think it's a Christmas episode every year.
Yeah, it's the Christmas joke swap, I think is what they call it.
Yeah, the Christmas joke swap, and it is a tremendous comedic moment, I think. And what's amazing about it, this is the same thing Dave Chappelle did, is it actually eliminates racism.
Right.
It's super dangerous to the system that says racism is everywhere, because when you have black people laughing at a white guy uncomfortably telling a joke only a black person can tell, that makes him appear to be this utmost racist. You just go, this guy's a normal guy. Right.
It brings everyone together. Yeah, and the part where Che brings out the fake civil rights activist to sit with him while he tells the jokes.
It was a fake civil rights activist, and he didn't know it was a fake civil rights activist, which made it even funnier the day after when I read that like the person didn't exist. And
because he kept saying, "I'm so sorry." It was so good. It's brilliant.
But that's why Chappelle was so dangerous for the Chappelle Show, and he had to run and fled to Africa because the rumor is that they were like, "Hey, you're getting rid of racial tensions in this country with your show," and we need those racial tensions, because when white people are laughing at themselves, that's a problem. And when black people are laughing at themselves, that's a problem. And when everyone's laughing at each other, it's an even bigger problem because you start to see the commonalities of people. And there's no better way to love your neighbor than to roast them, right? So,
at least with men, that's how men. That's what brings men together, right? Is the joy of making fun of each other, and women, they come together and collect one another differently, which is great and good. but if you make all the men, if you well, modern politics lives on division, and humor destroys division, and so it just that in and of itself, it's political in the right sort of way, in the Christian sort of way. That there's a really great book called The Golden Theme about the thing that holds all great literature together, and why great literature from different cultures ends up surpassing its own culture. That's the sort of thing that comedy is doing in those moments. And it's a huge threat to a system that lives on rivalry and division.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. Let me say real quick, I kind of want to turn this show into an open call show, because I think, whether you're, especially if you're an artist or filmmaker or comedian or something along those lines, if you want to hop on and mention something or talk or hop on, feel free to do so. I'll send you a link to the invite. Just leave a comment or send me a DM on Twitter. And I would love to have people on for this show. But no, I think you're right. But if you look at, like, if you give this like sort of political, like NBC, I remember hearing that when Jimmy Fallon touched Trump's hair, they fired the showrunner and they brought in a guy. I think he was a producer for like the Today Show. Like, he was a political producer. They brought him on to be the showrunner and got rid of the actual comedy show writer. And then obviously Jimmy Fallon's show just tanked after that, because Jimmy Fallon was never a political comedian.
Yeah.
It was never that.
And he wasn't trying to be in that moment either.
Right. Yeah, he wasn't. Well, that's why it was funny that he touched his hair. And then all the reports were like, you humanized Trump. And it's like,
a
Trump's
human being. How dare you humanize a human being?
Yeah. And I don't think they've ever recovered from that. I did read a report that Jimmy Fallon has brought on a comedy showrunner since then. And, but for some reason, whatever happened in that moment, I would love to talk to Jimmy about that one day. But the show never recovered from that.
Mm-mm.
And then you have someone like Colbert, who was a brilliant satirist, political satirist. Probably, I would argue his Colbert Report was probably one of the best political satires of all time in this country. Even though he was making fun of conservatives all the time, it was still funny. And then he has to distance himself from this Colbert sort of figure. And he gets Letterman's slot, and he just becomes this political hack. And dude, I do you remember what was because this was probably one of the most impactful clips I saw, was John Mulaney and Colbert, and they're interviewing each other, and they're talking in depth. They're talking in depth philosophy or whatever.
Yeah, they start worrying about, have I lost my soul?
Yeah, and Colbert, he forgets the cameras are on for a minute, and he says, sometimes the thing that keeps me awake at night is whether I'm too much of a people pleaser and I've lost my soul. And you just go, that is why.
Heart-rending.
Yeah, and he's got, like, part of me has got to know, because I really do like Stephen Colbert. I just part of me just wonders, man, like, he went the wrong direction, and I think he knows it, and he's trapped. And I don't know what it'll take to get him back, because I know if Trump wins this election, it'll just be 4 more years of Colbert trashing Trump the whole time.
Yeah.
What has been interesting in this political cycle is Colbert's irrelevancy, I think. Because he's not the comedian they show clips of and write about and share and post. And I think he's lost a lot of respect from other comedians as well. And
Well,
you know, and
it's Kill Tony is where everybody is sharing clips from now.
there's more people watching Kill Tony than there are watching Late Night Comedy.
It is the oddest, strangest thing. It's not if you know the history of television, but it is I think, an unexpected thing, because you never know where that underground resistance is going to come from.
Right, and you can't predict that. I think because we're building lore and we're talking to investors, and they're like, "Well, how do you predict where the next cultural moment?" And it's like you can't, but you can stick your finger out, feel which way the wind's blowing, and use capital and build upon the way things are already going. And I think that's what you see is you see people looking around and going, "This is the direction that things are going," and just pouring everything into it. Whereas conservatives wait till it's already happened, and then they try to build the thing, and then they wonder why nobody cared for a trans basketball movie, which in concept was great 2 years ago.
Right.
But now everyone's like, "Oh, I'm so tired of just the preaching in my movies that I just want a dumb story." But no, I like Kill Tony. I think, like, especially among conservative and Christian circles, we don't talk about it a lot because it's very vulgar and not for kids at all. But I think what you see there is you do see this ability to be able to incubate talent. For those that don't know, you have it's a live show. You have 60 seconds to come on, do a comedy, and then you have to like take interviews from the judges for like what seems like 15 minutes. It's an insanely long amount of time, especially if you're not funny. And so, but from that, the ones that can nail the jokes in their 60 seconds and then carry on an entertaining conversation with the judges and fire back, get invited back. Some get a golden ticket to perform anywhere in America as a startup. As an opening act. And so that's the basis of the show. But I want to explain to people here, the show is so big, they filled Madison Square Garden for 2 days with a live show. Tucker Carlson was a judge one time. Joe Rogan brought him on. He didn't know. Tucker didn't know. But, that's where he got that great clip of Cam, and he's like, "My grandmother hates you."
Yeah.
And Tucker says, "She doesn't really mean it." And he's like, "The heck she don't."
Yeah. Great clip.
She really hates you. But yeah, no, it was that, like, right. So, and that, but I just want to say that is because of Joe Rogan's influence. That show is so huge. That's backed by Joe Rogan. So again, like, here's, Joe Rogan not knowing what's going to take off. I mean, that show's been on 10 years, right? You go back and watch the first Kill Tony episode. The show's awful, right? And now it's filling Madison Square Garden. And then you also have Joe Rogan has completely changed the downtown district of the most liberal city in Austin, with comedy clubs, and people are doing comedy vacations to go to the mothership to watch open mic nights, to watch comedians, and then to go and visit all the other improv and comedy clubs in Austin that are all a result of what Joe Rogan is doing down there. So he's basically, I wouldn't call Joe Rogan a conservative figure, but for the purpose of this discussion, he is a conservative figure. You have a conservative in mind individual who is using comedy to basically change the creative landscape of the city that's insanely liberal. And, they talk about how people travel all the way from Australia to do comedy vacations, right? So, we can do it. We just have to understand the art and not be afraid of the consequences of telling a bad joke, which I don't think conservative infrastructure right now can handle a bad joke without complete overreactions and blog posts and, tirades about whether or not they're attacking Kamala or attacking Trump. But yeah, so I also on I think one of the highest viewed episodes of Kill Tony is when Shane Gillis did Trump and Adam Kay did Biden as judges in character for the whole 3-hour show.
Right.
And, and you watch that and you go, man, Saturday Night Live fired Shane Gillis for telling an offensive conservative joke.
It wasn't a conservative joke even. It was, it was, he did an Asian voice, a character with an Asian voice. Yeah.
That is so funny because Bobby Lee's show Bad Friends is all about racist comedy between the two hosts, right? You have the redheaded co-host, Bobby Lee, and the redheaded co-host is always doing racist Asian impressions, and Bobby Lee, who is Asian, is just cracking up the whole time. The comedy landscape is so different than the way mainstream media sees it nowadays. Yeah. That it's just right, and we're still trying to figure out how do we do it, and the answer is you just have to do it. You just have to back it financially. You have to take the risk of offending people. I think because comedy is supposed to offend people, and you can't have it offend one side or the other, and you can't have jokes that are pre-written and approved by the magistrate beforehand, or. I think that's where you get the term court jester, right? Where you see the image of the comedian and he's like, telling a joke, but worried that he's going to be beheaded by the king. And that's what a lot of conservative and leftist comedy is now. And that it doesn't work. And so, but you said court jesters all served a much more, was it you there telling me court jesters served like a much more important function than?
Yeah. Well, because one of the things that they were supposed to do was they had permission to tell the king the truth. That was part of what a court jester would do. And so I think we've always known that comedy has these important roles. And it's always been dangerous to be funny, right? That's just always been part of the deal in being in the part of the human race is that laughter is involuntary. It's right. Not something that when the laughter was self-caused, then we everybody mocks that. But laughter is an involuntary response to somebody telling an uncomfortable truth. There's a bunch of different kinds of comedy. But one of them is that telling the uncomfortable truth. Laughter is how people respond, and it's involuntary. So it's always been viewed as dangerous for that reason. But it's also always been viewed as dangerous by the powerful, right? That's why when things shift the way they do, it's much harder for the left to be funny right now because they're in power, right? And they have to be, wary of losing power or offending the powers, and so that's the situation we're in.
Yeah, cultural warfare. I said Warcraft with John Croft. He says, "You should make this a weekly show, dude." It is
Thursdays at noon.
Thursdays at noon, and we got a good guest next week too. He was going to be on it this week, but couldn't make it. But I'm excited to have him. We will announce that closer to time. But big time comedy writer, worked on late night. Just super great. Worked late night comedy, but and some other things. So we'll announce him next week. I want to mention one more thing. It might be a lot more than one thing, but I want to take us back 4 years ago when we were just starting lore, because this is really important, I think, we started the tradition of everywhere we travel, we try to find a comedy club in that area. Because I think in our minds was, well, this is how you find new talent. This is what everybody else does to find new talent. They go to the comedy clubs when there's 3 people in the audience and they find the artists that are really like going to be somebody. And so we just started doing that. And I think one of the first places we went was the Comedy Cellar in New York. We were there for Eric Metaxas' show. We just saw Metaxas' late night comedy show that he did, the pilot for that. And we were like, let's just go to this comedy show. And Comedy Cellar, by the way, if you guys don't know, that whole district is just comedy club after comedy club in the weirdest of building locations, like in closets and buildings. And comedy clubs. And you have guys
you walk through the comedy club, through a closet, into the back room of another comedy club, and there's a different comedy club back there.
Yeah, and then the next thing you know, like Dave Chappelle comes out and practices a bit. And that's the hope of that is a lottery ticket that keeps people coming every week. But that does happen. It didn't for us, unfortunately. But you know, when you're walking the street and there's comedians selling tickets, because I think they get a percentage of the tickets that they sell to fill the seats in place. And so we got our ticket, went to the show. It was I don't know if it was technically an open mic show, but they had about some people that were on the books to perform. And here we are in downtown New York, one of the most liberal cities in the United States. And comedian after comedian came out, and they were doing anti-trans comedy, anti-gay jokes, anti-liberal jokes. They were going after Joe Biden. And we were just like, where are we?
Yeah.
And they were killing it, like not getting booed. The audience was loving it. And then this liberal lesbian comic came up. And the first thing she said was, where are my lesbians at? And nobody raised their hand. And you just feel the tension, the air just got sucked out of the room. And she's like, I'm in danger.
Yeah.
And you know, and then she just gets frustrated because none of her gay jokes are landing. And she just goes, hey, you want to see my appendix scar? And she lifts up her shirt, shows her appendix scar, and then just walks off stage in the weirdest, most awkward moment. And me and you were like, dude, the era of leftist comedy is over. This was 4 years ago.
And we just hadn't, nobody had realized it yet.
And we kept telling people this for like 4 years. We were telling people, it's going to go this way. It's going to go this way. And now you see it. It's full blown Netflix, Dave Chappelle, Joe Rogan's live comedy show. You know, all these different comedians that are coming out now are making a name for themselves by being I don't think they're conservatives. I think they're just not woke, right? And we predicted that. And I think that's important, like, especially I look back on, like, what do I want Lore to be? What do I hope to achieve? Is I hope that we can get the resources in the capital that when we sense another wave coming, we can back it completely. And that way we can, at the end of the day, Christians and conservatives can own something before it takes place. And that's just investment risk and stuff. But compare that and the history of Saturday Night Live and those incubation systems, and then look around the conservative and Christian space and you go, why in the world do we not have talent scouts scouting high school basketball, looking for the next athlete to? Like, you can't just build a major league stadium and not have college basketball. Like you can't, or college baseball or whatever. Like, you have to have the talent scouts. If you Google the talent, if you Google like Michael Jordan or LeBron James, you can find the talent scout who gets the credit for finding that individual. Right? Like, that's like, right now, where are the talent scouts in conservative media? Christian media specifically. You don't have them. You have distribution companies.
No, the talent scouts are looking for the people that are aging out of Hollywood.
Oh, right. Oh, yeah, no, that's true. That's true. So the guys who had a career and then
In 90s sitcoms.
They're kind of just borderline retired, and then they come in and they write a big check to get them motivated again, and that's what we call a trade. Right? Like, that's a trade. That's not a talent scout. And that's sort of what conservative Christian media is. And so that's sort of what I want lore to be. Is I want us to be a talent scouts for the next generation of conservative faith-based media, and just culture as a whole, not even in that category. I think we're narrowing it too. I say it often because it's just a part of me and who I am, but I think the ultimate goal is just way more broader and more pop culture than what conservatives and Christians have a category for at the moment. Anything you want to add?
No, I mean, I think the world has always been changed from the underground. Ever since Jesus came from the underground to change the world, I think the world functions that way. So I think we need to just be realizing it and embrace it, and be less risk averse to that way of doing things.
Yeah, it's going to take a risk, right? It takes risk for NBC to put Saturday Night Live on the air every week, knowing people are going to trash it, probably because it didn't do well. And it takes risk on the actor's part to get up there and bomb in front of America every week after week. And, that's tremendous bravery required and tremendous risk. So
honestly,
let's build.
I think about that Biden putting up his Christmas tree bit all the time because it was so bad. It's the worst I've ever seen. And I thought that's the record for being the very worst of watching SNL for it's 25 years. Do you think that's the worst? Biden putting up his Christmas tree on SNL. It was the worst sketch ever. And I think about how big of a feat that is, because there were some bad sketches, but to be so memorably bad. And you have to get back up and be on again next week.
And in 5 minutes.
In 5 minutes. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. You don't got time to recover from bombing on Saturday Night Live. You got to get up and bomb again.
And the reason that they come out so good and get so successful is because that takes that builds your skill. There's nothing that builds your skill like that. So,
right. Well, I just want to encourage everybody to subscribe to Lore TV, get a free 7-day trial, and help incubate that next generation of artists. I think comedy is going to be a huge part of our next phase, and you guys can get in now and start funding content and building this incubation system that everyone needs. So LOOR.TV, subscribe, get a free 7-day trial. I appreciate you guys all for listening. Please be sure to watch and share this show and let your friends know folklore every week. I forgot to do the flag intro because we did the trailer, so I will end it with that.